Mr. Wyatt Simon, welcome to the REI Diamond Show. How you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great, Dan. How are you?
Doing well. I did the background on you and did my research. But for listeners who do not know who you are, do you want to give the introduction and maybe kind of how you got to the point where you're at in your real estate career today?
Yeah, I'll give you the quick synopsis. I'm probably best well known for the guy that took a 200K line of credit and turned it into a $20 million portfolio. Um, it started slow, buying a duplex, living in one side, renting out the other. Eventually started using the BRRRR strategy in single family, going slow and steady until I was able to set up my own direct-to-seller system off market and eventually buy enough properties that I could not be in my W-2 job anymore, set up a property management company, and now just do real estate deals.
Nice. What is the main focus of your deals these days? What gets your real estate juices flowing there?
Looking for value add assets in Omaha and Lincoln, Nebraska.
Omaha, Nebraska, and Lincoln. That wasn't where you were born. So how did you land on Omaha, Nebraska, Wyatt?
Well, I went to play college. I grew up in Colorado and played basketball in a small school called Doane University in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska. But that is where 5'11" white guys go to play basketball. So uh, that is where I landed.
And then what? Did you like meet a significant other or something that kind of kept
Yeah.
you?
Met my college sweetheart, who's now my wife, and she lives in
Congratulations.
Omaha. Thank you. And so, Omaha's got some benefits too. And yeah, I'm enjoying the less traffic, less prices, and nice tenant base here. So,
Yeah, and I think that's what is that. Warren Buffett is the famous guy from Omaha, the Oracle of Omaha.
absolutely, the Oracle himself.
Nice. Maybe it's like one of those what do they call them? Like meridian points on the globe. Maybe Omaha's like one of them secret ones, and you land on that and become this great wealth building financial guru, right?
Don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody.
Yeah, right.
It's a
So
secret.
let's pull on the thread for that market. So Omaha, Nebraska, what kind of a population base is Omaha, Nebraska? Do you know roughly what the population out there?
Yeah, so the metro is about 1 million. We're a little over 1 million in Omaha itself. We're growing at about a 2% rate per year, and yeah, it's just a great family base. I'll tell you this: when I first moved to Nebraska, I grew up in Colorado, right? No one ever said hi to each other. There's a million, there's a lot of people, but I'm walking down the sidewalk and everyone's saying hi just on the sidewalk in Nebraska. I'm like, what is it? Why are you looking at me right now? And so yeah, I've learned that the Nebraska base is a little bit different than the Colorado base, and yeah, it's a good time, good people.
That's pretty cool. Coming from Colorado, where in Colorado was it?
So I grew up in the Fort Collins area in a little town called Severance, but it's located really close to Fort Collins.
What's the elevation out there? Do you know?
Ooh, I want to say it's about 7,500.
So it's up there then, right?
Yeah, it's a little different than Omaha here.
Yeah. So when you came to Doane and went to the university, did that training your whole career in basketball at elevation, did it make it any easier when you got down to sea level to compete?
For about 2 or 3 months, I was a superhuman, and then I got used to it, and then it was just the way it was. So, not too much.
Yeah, I recently heard a fact that mitochondrial biogenesis, which is like the mitochondria is engine for your cell. So that's like what's creating ATP. That's what's giving basically the energy life comes from the mitochondria inside the cell. Biogenesis means it duplicates. So you can exercise in zone two specifically, like on a treadmill, a bike, whatever. And they've done the test. You will like double the number of mitochondria. And as you age, they actually shrink and they're like halving over time. So an older person's gonna have less mitochondria than a younger, part of why your body can fight off infections. But the fact was, there were two things that would sort of by default create mitochondrial biogenesis. One was living at elevation, and the other one was like cold exposure. So a lot of these people with the ice baths and You name it. But his follow-up to that fact was people from Colorado have this much higher immune system, healthier climate because of those two facts. Like by default, whether they're exercising, riding the bike, or eating healthy or not, like those two things put you at an advantage. So you've given that up now for Omaha.
Yeah, that would explain why in college I was never sick as a kid, and then I got sick in college. I thought it was calf food, but might have been that too.
Wow. So 2% growth. Why are people moving to Omaha? Do you know what's driving that? Is that just like a natural growth of population? People have more kids there. What is it that makes the population increase there while it's not everywhere?
I'd say a lot of people are just staying put. There's not a lot of people moving away from Omaha. You got families that are having babies, and you got colleges that are bringing kids in. I know Creighton basketball's a big one. And then there's a lot of tech going on. There's a lot of tech jobs here. So between all the three, cost of living, right? There's some population coming in. There's some families that are just continuing on to live here. I've realized a lot of Nebraska families you don't get too far from, speaking from experience.
Yeah. Yeah, she was not going to Colorado.
Not yet. We'll just say that.
Yeah, I met my fiance. I'm living in Chicago, and she's from Milwaukee. I'm originally from Philadelphia, as a lot of listeners already know. So Chicago has turned out to be this middle ground between where her family is in Milwaukee and then mine in Philly. So I know the pool of the pool of love, right?
Mhm.
So Wyatt, one of the things I've also learned, observed, maybe it's an opinion, but you got like West Coast real estate and you have East Coast real estate. We could say Sunbelt real estate. Sunbelt and West Coast seem to be boom and bust, right? For the last 5 years, everyone wanted everything in the Sunbelt. Sunbelt, 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 Florida, Austin, Texas, Dallas, Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, all the way up into the Carolinas, Tennessee, etc. And a lot of those markets have seen a tremendous amount of apartment development. There's, I forget, like 80,000. I don't remember the number. A ton of new units are coming online. I'm starting to hear people gripe and complain about, well, now the rents they're not growing like they were. In fact, they're even falling as a lot of this inventory comes online. And we probably have a pipeline of new construction apartment inventory for another, I don't know, deliveries for another 12 to 24 months to maybe depress that market. And the reputation that the Midwest would get, right? Chicago real estate. They did not put up the volume of apartment buildings that they did in the Atlanta, Georgia market or in Florida. Is that we don't see that boom and bust. We don't see the rapid growth, but we also don't see the rapid decline. There may be, more subtle wave, if you will, wave function in the growth. Does Omaha operate like kind of the Midwest reputation of apartment real estate?
Absolutely. Yeah. I saw a crazy fact, and I know you're talking about apartments, but I'll say this. I saw a crazy fact. In 2006 to 2008, the Omaha housing market dropped 6%. So you had Vegas and Phoenix and other markets dropping, 60%. But we're very insulated. I would say we lag behind a lot of the curves. And on that note, too, in quarter 3 and quarter 4 last year, I believe it was quarter 3 last year, when we were starting to see rent decline across the nation, Omaha was actually the #1 for apartment rent growth in the nation. It's either quarter 3 or quarter 4 last year. And so we are lagging behind the nation on that front. Now we do have some waves going on. I can tell you, during COVID, we didn't build, and I think a lot of the nation didn't build, right? And then the year after COVID, we saw a lot of construction permitting get taken place. And now we're seeing half of that has halted as interest rates have gone up. And so we're still seeing our rent continue to go up. They're just not going up as fast as they were, and they're not decreasing like the rest of the nation here.
Yeah, and we're doing some development deals as up to that observation. Quarter 4 of 2022, builder sentiment went to like zero. I mean, you probably relate, everyone on the podcast relates. I was like, when the interest rates went from 3 to 7, it was just such a shock.
Mhm.
How does anyone do this? Like 7%, 6 and 3 quarters. I refuse. to pay it, and everyone else was going to. But people started to pay it. And I'm like, look at this, right? So they were seized up quarter three, quarter four, and then quarter one this year. I bought the place in Florida, and I remember like signing the contract. I know the interest rates are high, and I'm like, I'm not gonna pay 7% interest. And then I had to have this like mental gymnastics around me paying the seven, and it turned out to be 7.25% interest. And like, that's what I'm paying on the mortgage. Imagine that most of America has done that, and we'll probably see some relief here coming up soon. And then what as the follow up to the builder sentiment thing, going to start anything new. Quarter four of 2022. We all pretty much assumed it was like 2008 or 9 all over again from like new construction perspective, and probably most of the existing residential real estate in the country. And then, January, February, March, sentiment came back a little bit, but by quarter four of 2023, builder sentiment is back up high again. Friends of mine, myself, we're doing deals, and builders are paying cash for land, and they are planning to put shovels in the ground. They're putting in shovels as we speak. So it was amazing to see the sentiment in the market fall so quickly. To see the sentiment fall so quickly and then come back so quickly. It was another whipsaw, just like the interest rates, just a total whipsaw. And here we are, I guess what, January 2024. I'm amazed that the prices have held up, right? In 2022, prices dropped pretty drastically going into December and January. I mean, we had 15 and 20% lower sale prices on the retail side, and then they ripped right back up to where they were before. I was amazed to see the prices recover, and I think a lot of people, including myself, are like, "Is this now the new normal?" I mean, what do you think? Are we looking at like more actualized prices? I know we have Austin and we have California that are really taking a hit, and maybe that's going to show up elsewhere. But I'm curious what you would think on that.
Yeah, so here's my take. If we printed 40% of the population's money in the last 2 years, then that's going to affect pricing because that money needs to find a home, right? And you mix that with we didn't build during COVID, right? So there's still some supply and demand shortages. And then we didn't build because of what you were saying with interest rates, right? Like some developers need to get massaged into the interest rate environment that we're currently in to build. So you kind of mix all of that. I truthfully think that we're just seeing a dip, and that's the quote unquote crash because we're not experiencing 2006 or 2008 where the housing market is just crippled by an actual crash. We're still chained to supply and demand, and the supply is not outpacing the demand that there is for the apartments and the amount of money that wants to find a home. And so I think if we're starting to really reach an equilibrium, at least in my market, where sellers' expectations are very, very close to what we're able to pay now. I think if you miss this next quarter one, quarter two, you might miss where we're headed.
Yeah, getting a couple good deals now. When you say the seller's expectations and your willingness to pay, is that residential single family or is that the multifamily assets?
In the multifamily assets. I mean, it
Okay.
was just exponential, sellers' expectations to where interest rates, it was just not even close. And now we're starting to see sellers come down, and hopefully we start to see interest rates drop a little bit. And so we're really starting to see equilibriums coming up. I'll say, instead of $1 million off, we're 6 figures off, and that's better to see.
Yeah, that's a start. I know we didn't really give a context. One of the reasons I was excited to have you on the show when I saw the application come through the booking channels was you put together a pretty high volume of units in a short period of time. Would you mind elaborating on that with some details?
Yeah, I mean, I've been blessed. I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad when I was really young, and then that just stemmed, okay, assets can make money while you sleep so that you don't have to work for assets. And I'm sure your audience knows that very well. And so then I started using the BRRRR strategy, right? I didn't have a lot of money, but I was in my younger 20s and I said, okay, learned about the BRRRR strategy. If anybody doesn't know, that means buying, renovating, renting, refinancing, and repeating. And the reason why that's so powerful is I was able to use a little bit of capital to then buy a property, improve it, and then refinance that capital back and keep the property. So now I was able to buy these assets for quote unquote free and recycle that little bit of capital again and again and again. So I did that with 42 single family houses
Wow.
in the matter of 4 years. And that was, all after work, right? So just, going to my W-2 job and then hustling after work. And eventually thought, wow, this is a lot of work. Why don't I do this with multifamily? And so I stumbled across multifamily. I got mentored by some good people. Shout out to Jake and Gino. And then I was able to take the same strategy and pivot into multifamily apartments. And man, the reason why I love that is they're evaluated based off the net operating income. And I'm sure your audience knows that. So now we're able to really force appreciation through value add assets. And so that's really what I cut my teeth on. I love being the infinite return investor. And we just look for deals that are mismanaged that we can go in there and really streamline it with our in-house management team.
Nice. And what do you guys got? 100 plus units or so right now for the multifamily stuff?
Yep. So currently at 176 units and
Nice.
looking to buy more.
And that's all in the Omaha region?
Correct. Yeah. Within 60 miles of Omaha and Lincoln, Nebraska.
Is Lincoln included in that same MSA of 1 million people, or is that a separate
It's
city?
separate city. They've got about
Okay.
250K of people.
Okay. Yeah. So they're decent sized markets. I came up in the Philadelphia region, so we're talking about an MSA that's probably 5 to 8 million, depending on where you draw the line. And if you drew it a little further, you're including New York City. So it's like a megalopolis, right?
Yeah.
I moved to Chicago, which was even more population. I think we had like 8 million people in the 5 county region when I moved there, right outside the city in the collar counties. And then Atlanta, I'm like, oh man, we're going to this like really small market here in Atlanta, and we're opening an office. I think it was like 4.9 million people in Atlanta, and that made me nervous. And it's interesting you're saying. I mean, I've grown since then. I realized the power of 250,000 people is a substantial sustained community. That's enough. In fact, 50,000 is probably a sustainable community, depending on the size of the asset. 50,000 may be enough as long as you have population stability there. But it was just like had you told me that it was 1 million people in Omaha, oh my gosh, I don't know how that's going to work for him, or 250 in Lincoln, I would have been thinking you were like off the rocker. But there's tons of real estate. All those people have to live, eat, shop somewhere. So it's plenty of people there to be stable. So how do you go about finding these?
So we go direct to seller with a lot of our stuff. That's kind of how I cut my teeth. Again, with all the single family houses that I have under my belt. So direct to sellers are one route. We also go with brokers and brokers pre-market, brokers on market, right? So we've been building broker relationships. Been in multifamily for 2.5 years, so can't sit here and say I'm Dan yet. But we're slowly developing relationships with our team here. Omaha's definitely a good old boys club. I'll say that.
Okay, all right. And the 42 houses, were they all in the Omaha region as well?
Correct. Yep. All over, like, good neighborhoods, bad neighborhoods. Wherever we could get them at a price that made sense for us to get them with no money out of pocket, that still cash flowed. We took them. Yep.
What was your cash flow requirement, on house 1 through 10 versus houses 35 through 42? Was there like a $200-$300 per month? Like how did you look at that and say, okay, this passes the test?
Yep. So how I looked at it was if I could so if I could refinance all my money and break even with a buffer for CapEx and OpEx, then I'll do that deal. And so that was obviously a lot easier when I was, really getting my reps in and really going through it from, 2017 to 2022, where interest rates were low and dropping. And then obviously that has gotten harder for those assets to be picked up with the current debt service requirements where we're at.
Yeah, I hear that. What was the buffer?
The
You
buffer.
said the
So
buffer for
yeah, we had
repairs?
10x for so 10% for CapEx,
Okay.
projects, and then I had 6% for property management, and then PITI.
What are the rents on an average deal?
That's about 1,500.
Have they gone up dramatically at all through that 17 to 2024 now?
Yeah, the first deal I bought, I think I rented out for 1,250, and now we're at 1,750, and I rented that out in 2018.
Nice. Same tenant?
Oh no, no,
Okay, all right.
no, unfortunately not.
Yeah, I think you landed in. I mean, it works in a lot of markets. It doesn't work in every market. The Burr method. I think your timing was impeccable. I mean, not that it can't be done today, but I think a lot of people are going to be playing more of a game of getting in there, probably needing it for a lower purchase price than maybe you could have made work in 2018 or 2019 at the moment. And then taking a gamble and a bet that the interest rates are going to level off, come down, and you're going to be able to do some kind of refi here at some point in the future. So the 176 units. Let's talk about the first one. So now you're going to do multifamily. How did you find it? How did you put it together? How did you fund it, finance it, fix it up, whatever it was to execute on the first deal? Could you give us a rundown of a case study if you would?
Definitely. Well, I'll share this story first. So I'll tell you about my $1 million lost opportunity. I was running a lead for my foundation company. It was a basement waterproofing lead. I go to an apartment complex, and this guy's smoking and cussing, and he just eventually shows me the problem. I make the sale. He signs the contract, and that's where I was a little taken back. I thought he was the maintenance tech. Turns out he was the owner, and he's just like, this guy is, like, I asked him, like, are you owner? He's like, yep. And then I'm like, well, do you want to sell this thing? Like, I kind of inherently am like, okay, I just purchased a duplex, but maybe I can get this 76 unit, whatever. I don't,
Nice.
knowing nothing about multifamily. But anyways, he says yes. And so I was like, okay, great. Well, I'm 22 years old. I can buy multifamily. Send me over your stuff and we'll see what we can do. And so he sends me his analysis on, or he sends me his T12 and rent rolls, and I don't know what a T12 and rent rolls are at all. And so then I'm just sitting there for a week, just trying to like Google, like, how do I do this? And I am so clueless. I don't have a mentor. I don't have anyone close to me that's ever done multifamily. I'm just learning about this house hacking thing. And then he starts calling me. He's like, Wyatt, where are we at with this? I want $2.4 million. And I'm like, dude, $2.4 million. I'm in debt at this point. Like, I don't have a negative net worth. I don't know what $2.4 million I'm going to do with that. And so then he calls me again in 3 days and says, Wyatt, where are we at with this? I'm like, hey, I need a little bit more time. I don't know. And eventually I call him back and I say, hey, I'm sorry. I just don't know what I'm doing here. Like, you probably need to go with someone else. And he says,
Oh,
it's too late. I listed this with a broker. I'm listing it at 3 million. And then that thing sold for $3.4 million.
wow. $1 million left on the table, huh?
Yeah. So there's my lost $1 million opportunity as a 22-year-old. But to take that further to answer your question, I said, okay, I never want that to happen again, right? I know there's an opportunity cost to not getting educated on how to buy apartments. And so then I got educated, and later on I had, it was someone in my network had a property that they wanted to sell. It was a 23 unit in Omaha. And so I was able to get out there and negotiate with them. I brought a mentor with me that helped me set it up, right? Because I was 26 at the time. And then we ended up buying it. We renovated the units. And I'll say, when I say we ended up buying it, I bought it with a different business partner. We negotiated 90% seller carryback. And so I brought 5%. My business partner brought 5%. I also got an acquisition fee. So I was all into a 23 unit with 25 grand out of pocket. And then we were able to improve the NOI significantly by over 50%. And then we were able to do a 6-figure cash out refi and still own that to this day.
nice. Was there a lot of CapEx involved in bumping those rents 50%?
There was not. It was a well maintained asset but rents were just not raised, and we charged RUBS. So, right, they weren't charging for utilities. So we just
Oh, okay.
built utilities back, raised rents about $200 per unit, and didn't have to do much to the units themselves to attain that.
Can you describe RUBS?
Yeah, so
Define
RUBS
it.
RUBS is essentially billing back utilities. It stands for Ratio Utility Bill Back System. Now you can hire companies to actually, get the water bill and then distribute it back pro rata to the tenants. What we do, and it's legal in Nebraska to do, is just charge a flat rate for utilities, and then you don't have to involve a company within that. And so we always look at our water bill. If it's 24,000 for the year, we just pro rata that out per unit. And then just make sure the 2 and the 3 bedrooms are charged more than the 1 bedrooms. So
Interesting. So it's just kind of an accounting and billing thing on your end here in this 23 unit deal?
correct. Yep. And think
No
about it.
water meters and all this, like there's no sub metering going on, anything like that.
Nothing
How
like
about
that.
that?
We just took a $24,000 expense and put that right into the NOI.
Okay, cool. So 23 units, nice cash out refi. Love the seller financing piece. That's an interesting component on that first one. What about the most recent deal that you did? The one you're recently closed? How did that one shake out? How did you put that together? How did you find the deal setter?
So most recent one we closed was an 18 unit in Lincoln, and it was located right next to a 36 unit that we syndicated about 2 years ago. So it was a neighboring one. We had reached out to all the owners nearby whenever we buy something to let them know that we're still in the market and we'd love to make an offer if they're looking to sell. Well, it just so happened that the sellers reached out to us about a year afterwards and said, I love what you're doing with the other place. We're actually looking to sell at this point. So we were able to line that up. And then I structured that as a JV partnership with me and 3 other partners on that one. 4 other
So
partners.
you did a syndication on the 36 unit. Now you got a JV with 3 or 4 partners. You had only 1 partner on the original deal. I imagine there's a handful others. I'm not going to like pick your whole portfolio apart here.
Yeah.
But you're doing some capital raising. I mean, if you're going forward or scaling, like what does it look like? Are you kind of like, hey, whatever this deal is comes by, I'll peel off all the exterior, I'll get underneath, and whatever's going to fit for this one, I'll do? Or do you kind of have this like plan for how you see yourself scaling forward?
So I like to be a long-term buy and hold investor. And so I like to align myself with investors and partners that align with that. And then I love using the value add BRRRR strategy investing to that. Right. So to answer your question, if we get 100 unit, I'm not going to be able to JV that myself. Right. And so I'm going to be syndicating a 100 unit deal. And we're going to be raising capital with investors that are completely passive, that believe in the strategy that we're doing. If we have a smaller, like 12 unit deal, then that may be a JV opportunity with me and a few other partners where we can just hold this thing forever. Otherwise, our syndications are usually a 6 to 10 year hold. We're long-term hold investors, and we like letting real estate do the work after we improve the asset. We like sitting in it and letting the cash flow on it once we're done with it, because we're doing a lot of work on the front end.
What did you use to underwrite the 18 unit? Was that like a price per unit? Was it cap rate? How did you come up with the offer that you made to that seller?
So we were looking at achieving at least a 15% IRR for the investment itself, and for any cap for all of my partners that I had on the deal.
Okay, so that would be you had one, oh, you had 2 or 3 partners on that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, all right. What was the capital raise and the purchase price on that one?
That one we bought for 1.7, and I think we raised 500 for it.
And that was like a regular go to the bank for financing kind of deal, or did you get the seller to participate?
Yeah, so that one we used a local bank. We've got a lot of great community banks that'll do work with us. And what they did is they'll do 80% of the as completed appraisal. We brought 20%, plus we'll bring 20% of the rehab.
Okay.
And then they structure.
So that's like 90,000, give or take, a unit. What do you describe that section of Lincoln? Are we like class A, B, C? What are the rents per door and something like that?
I'd give it a class B area, and it was a class C asset, which is exactly what we look to do. So we're taking this class C and taking it to probably a B minus, right?
Okay.
It's a 1964 build, most really big 1 bedrooms, and then the other half are all 2 bedrooms. And just a lot of it hasn't been updated since the 60s. And so we're taking that, we're doing brand new flooring, all new kitchens, all new bathrooms. We're putting in about 14K a pop. And then that really elevates our rents that we can get about $350 plus utility fees, plus Wi-Fi. And so there's a lot of ancillary income that we add to it as well.
Was this one fully occupied when you closed?
It was, I think, maybe 1 vacancy, but yeah, mostly fully
So,
occupied.
so what's the strategy there? Are you like exiting everyone, or is it like we're raising rents across and 6 move out? We're going to do those 6. How do
Yeah.
you
Man,
executing that?
let me educate the audience on something I learned. So don't do what I did. Okay. So what we did coming into it is we said, okay, we're going to do, rents raised across the board about 3 per unit or 3 units per month, and just renovate as we go and get this thing turned in a year. Well, what ended up happening is we have had about 6 units that have come available during December and January. And those are not times that you want to have your units come available, because we had 17 inches of snow on the ground for the last week.
Whew.
And we've had school shut down for over a week because it's just been so snowy here. So long story short, we do map out our business plan for when we're going to be raising rents, and we expect tenants to leave or move into a renovated unit if they're qualified. But we will definitely we will equate the seasonality to it next time.
Yeah, that's smart. I have, I don't know, 39 or something like that units. I think 10 of those are houses. For me, it was more a place to just put some cash. I think of it like an IRA. Like I have cash tied up in there. I did some burrs on a couple of the houses early on when I didn't have as much cash. But at this point, it was like, hey, I bought this 14 unit building. All the rents are low, and I'm gonna turn them over time. And I think we did 2, 3 renovations in the first year. I have a third party property manager, and I'm not really making a ton of cash on it. If I dug in and I put together my own team and really tightened up the management, I'm sure I could get more money out of it and go ahead and scale it. But honestly, we're kind of busy with the house flipping operation and Diamond Equity, so it's just not where I have to allocate my time. It's just, those rents are increasing, the debt's paying down. Someday it's going to be good to have that nest egg. So my philosophy is going to be completely different than what you're doing and what a lot of the listeners are going to do as well. But yeah, what are we doing? I think we raised a lot of the rent, and a lot of the tenants paid it because they hadn't had a raise in like 15 years, a lot of them. So they just paid this like somewhat increase. I mean, we're not going to get to $1,400 a unit from 6 without renovation, but we could get to 900, we could get to 950. And a lot of people looked around and there's nowhere else available for that kind of rent in the neighborhood. But that seasonality thing, legitimate. That is a very legitimate thing. I would jump up and down like my hair's on fire. To anybody listening who hasn't adjusted seasonality, I mean, we'll do a 15-month lease if we rent to them in January. So sorry, it's just a 15-month lease. That's it. Um, just a 15-month lease. We've done 8-month leases so that I would have my vacancy occur in March, April, or May, could do my turnover, and I could come on in June, July, or August and get. I mean, it's $200-300 a month difference to come on in the summer versus coming on in January, at least in the Chicago market where I am.
Yeah, and it's the same way in Lincoln. Lincoln is primarily the Huskers Stadium, so Nebraska Cornhuskers, and so there's a lot of college. I mean, the rents are significantly more during the spring when all the students are finding a place, and that's about 20 to 30% of the rental base. So
Nice. So if somebody were, I mean, there's probably some level of experience, maybe no experience at all, and they just read Rich Dad Poor Dad. I mean, would you suggest going ahead and trying to jump right into 4, 8, 12, 20 unit buildings? Like, what would be your advice for someone listening right now on getting started or moving into multifamily?
I would say there's two different, right? If you're just getting started, start with a house hack if you can, right? If you don't have a huge family, or even if you do, and you can live in one side and rent out the other, and you're okay doing that, that is going to be the best way to change your cash flow and have equity starting to be paid down, get introduced to what being a landlord is like, and then you can see if it's for you, right? And you can get into a home for 3.5% down with an FHA loan, right? So it's very attainable for a lot of people to get started. Now, if you're maybe a little older in life, you got a family, maybe you got equity, maybe you got a business that's going well, then you don't need to start with house hacking. And I would say it really depends on what is your end goal. Like, maybe you should just buy a couple houses because that's just kind of what you want to do. You want to do something on the side, or if you want to get into multifamily, then you're going to have to know that it's a larger barrier to entry. And so it's going to take more education, it's going to take more action, and it's going to be a longer lead time to get into multifamily. But once you do, it is very rewarding. And so I'd say you really need to know thyself to make that decision. And it's not a bad thing to get your training wheels in single family.
Yeah, you're right about that. I bought my single family houses because they were familiar, because it just happened to be there with a tenant paying $1,000. I could get it for 50 grand done. I bought it. I think that was the first rental that I ever bought myself. And then, the apartment buildings became sort of the next thing. For me, I kind of learned that I don't want to go to 99 units, and I like the syndication deals. I think syndication, for anyone listening, that means I'm the passive guy participating in a deal, putting my cash in, and I don't have any day-to-day responsibility. I get an email 4 times a year with the report, and ideally, in a perfect world, I'm getting the ACH distribution also 3, 4 times a year when that syndication is successful. At each of those stages for me, Wyatt, so I've been in business since 2006. There were, I don't know if it was like a building block of trust, maybe in myself, maybe in the other partner. The first block of trust was, is that $1,000 a month tenant going to pay the rent? And it was like, I'm losing sleep from the 30 days I'm under contract to when I'm going to close. It's the morning of closing. I got the deed package. I'm getting ready to drop it in the mail or send the wire that day. I don't remember which. And I'm like, I need proof that the tenant's paying. And the guy's like, look, you gotta fucking close the deal, or you gotta get the hell out of the deal. I'm like, okay, moment of truth, wire off the money. And then I'm thinking, oh my gosh, there's gonna be now 14 different tenants who are all uh I'm relying on all 14 tenants to pay the rent. What if 6 of them don't pay? And there was that moment again. I got to wire off the money, the moment of truth. And so as I got now in the most recent years, I have had that feeling with the syndication. It's like what? You hear this guy on a podcast, or you're supposed to trust them. You meet him at a seminar, you're supposed to trust them. I think I did my due diligence the best I could. I talked to people who invested with them, but at some point, it's like I've got to have this trust in the situation to participate in that deal. I like the syndication because I've been able to scale the amount of money I've been able to invest without having to scale the responsibilities, which is you go from 9 houses to 49 units to 176, and you got to put a team together, right? So how much time versus money, and what are you trying to accomplish there? Where do you fit into the business? I would say if you're thinking you're going to syndicate and you have cash, you don't just listen to the podcast and then fire off the wire and think it's 100% sure thing. You got to go to the seminars, you got to go to the events, you got to read the books, you got to understand the businesses. If you're buying that asset yourself, in my opinion, you got to understand population growth. You got to understand the demographics. You got to understand vacancy rates. How much construction is being built in this asset class in this area, right? You got to get a feel for how to evaluate the risk. And I'm saying all that right now, doing a lot of that work after I had already sent the wire off to make myself feel better. But I did become a better underwriter, I hope, right? Knock on wood. All those syndications are still in motion as we speak. But you definitely got to get the education before you jump in, even if you're just going to be the syndicator partner.
Yeah. I mean, think about it this way, right? If you're investing in a syndication, you're investing in a good operator can save a bad deal, and a bad operator can ruin a good deal. You're betting on the jockey, not the horse. And so that's one of the reasons why I set up the property management company, because we are responsible from A to Z. I had 2 experiences with property managers that were not executing my business plan. And I'm like, well, it's either you or me. And so I figured it was you for the first one. The second one failed to execute it again. I was like, well, maybe it's me. I'll set it up and I'll do it. And then I executed it. And man, what a concept, right? So when we do anything, we're vertically integrated investments, and I control it A to Z to make sure that if it is something going wrong, it's my fault and I can fix it. I'm not relying upon something else.
Yeah, as you say that, I did not intentionally choose the syndications because those syndicator operators had their own management in-house. But looking back now, I'm glad they did, as I hear you say that. I'm like, oh yeah, that's actually part of why I really felt I could trust each of those partners, because they had all the answers to my questions, and they had the marketing plans, and they had far more nuance on the management of the self-storage facilities or the shopping center that I'm invested in than I would have had, or that the third party manager would have. Like, my third party manager is good. They do a good job. They handle evictions, and they're like kind of managing the assets. The snow is going to be removed when it snows, and it's off my plate. But 100% for sure, they're not going to be making decisions from being in the shoes of the owner. And it's very comforting to hear when the operator has that in-house and has a close communication channel with the in-house. It's not this who not how, set it and forget it, and I'm off on the beach with the coconut bowl and the umbrella. And like, that's not real estate. The operator should be very close to the asset and to the management team. So that's strong. What would a syndication deal look like for you? How do you set that up? Is there, a split with the partners? Is there a preferred return? Like, what would investors expect if they were going to invest in Omaha with you?
Yep. So I'll just kind of go through our last deal that we did. Our investors on that deal are on track to get a 20% APR return per year on that deal. Now that includes the cash flow and the equity that is built. That last deal that we did, we bought for 2.78, and it's probably evaluated about 4.2 right now, a year and a half later. And so we just look for value add opportunities with that. We also look to do a cash out refi to give our investors back their capital so that they can invest again, and they retain equity and cash flow when we do that. And so I just take the burst strategy, and we just do the same thing with bigger buildings so that other people can enjoy it as well. And to answer your question, we do that one was a 6% preferred return with an 80-20 split.
Who's getting the 80?
The investors.
Okay. Yeah, that's strong. That's strong. That's fair, in favor of the money. That's good. Do you guys do any depreciation cost segregation up front? Is there any tax benefits on your deals?
Absolutely. Yep. Our investors, I believe we got about 35% of the purchase price taken back out to all the investors in depreciation on year 1.
Did you give the investors did you split the depreciation 80-20, or did you put the allocation for the depreciation on the 80% only?
The allocation was only for money invested. So
Wow.
yeah, for the investors, and we invested money too. So we're part of that. Everything I do is aligned interests, right? Just like you said.
I like it. Yeah, the deal I did, the first one, I don't feel like, now that I know what I know and I've read through everything, I don't necessarily feel like the interests were quite aligned. And then in the second deal, the guy had like $10 million of his own money, and he was like allocating that across 3 funds. And I'm like, oh, that's why his is much more favorable, because of the same reason that you just said. It's like his money's going in there too. So that is the most fair and equitable way, at least in my opinion, to if I'm the guy bringing the money to the table.
Definitely. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
cool. That's cool. Um, Cool. Wyatt, so what book recommendations would you make for the audience? I know you had mentioned Rich Dad Poor Dad. I read it, love it. Lots of people have. So let's cross that one off the list and share one or two more that have been instrumental in your success.
Well, for me, The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey has been a absolute game changer for me. I read that when I was 21, and I started with I had my own eulogy, right? It goes through a practice of you actually going to your own funeral and having, your four closest people next to you actually give speeches, and you write down what they're going to say, right? And it I did a deep dive on my life of, okay, what are they saying now as a 21-year-old partier, right? In college versus what do I want them to say? And so that helped me begin with the end in mind, which really shaped and reformed what I did. And another piece of that in there too is you do your personal mission statement. And so it's like, what do you truly stand for? And what do you take action and what do you not take action on, right? And what do you live for? And so having that clarity at that young of age really helped me, I think, have this drive that maybe not everyone has. And it just helped me push through the hard times, because anybody can get through the easy times. It's when it's hard, if you have that deep why, that's what will continue to push you forward.
Nice. Yeah, I did Seven Habits. I was probably 26. What are you now? You're like 30, 31?
29.
29 years old. All right, that's cool. I was probably 26, getting into the business 27 when I found Stephen Covey. And I don't think I did the homework the way you described. I don't think I actually wrote it. I think I wrote the eulogy, and it's been something that's always been on my mind and trying to calibrate to live my life for the right reasons. And I've had a lot of trials and tribulations since then, but it's cool to hear that had that impact at such a young age at 22. And it's the evidence is kind of here to speak for itself at this point. So Wyatt, if you could share the crown jewel of wisdom with yourself, you're 29, you're going to go back, you're 21 again, you're maybe reading Seven Habits. What would be the crown jewel of wisdom that you would share with yourself then, knowing everything that you know now?
It's a great question. I would tell myself that you don't need to use the word should, and that you don't need to use absolutes, and that you can take pressure off of yourself, right? Like, everything is the way it is for a reason. You were made for a purpose, and um, you're destined for great things. Just continue to be grateful and focus on the lead measures, and everything else will work itself out.
Would you mind giving me an example of the absolutes? When you say no absolutes, what do you mean by that?
Never, always, every time, right? I've recently just kind of gone through and reshaped and reframed how I think of things, and the language you use communicates the thoughts that you have, right? And so I've had to learn that, like, should, for example, it implies that something is the way it isn't, or something isn't the way it is. And so if you say should, and it also, number two, is it implies inaction. So it's like, if I should do this, well, it's like, okay, well, that means it's not the way it should be. And also you're not doing anything about it. Right. And so it's like cruel. Right. So, and then the other thing for like the absolutes, it's like, when you're talking to your family, you should never use the word "you always do this," because
Mm.
yeah, there's hardly ever a time where there's always or a never. And your language is very powerful. So it can shape how your environment reactions are with each other. And now I start to listen to it, and I can hear other people's maturity and how they talk, where the language, and I can just see how they're thinking, right? It's like, I can hear what they're processing up here.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that. So I read the Bible in 2010 through about 2013, cover to cover to cover to cover, Proverbs back and forth. And I really gave my life back to God during that time. And many great lessons, foundational spiritual lessons came from the Bible. And one of those was the power of the exact words. Like, you can believe what you want about the past, but God said, let there be light. And then there was light. He didn't say, God, there should be light. He spoke, there's light. Let there be man, there's a man. All he did was spoke the words, and it was like, oh, if God can create with specific words, then what can we do too? And as a follow-up to that, just in the past 3 months or so, the focus of my own meditations have been around, where am I speaking from? And I'm observing myself speaking in conversations. And does that reflect the beliefs that I want to hold in my mind? We're developing real estate, and that's a new thing for us in the last 12 months. But for a while, it was, I'm going to do this, and we should do that, and we want to do this. Well, we have property under contract, and it's waiting to go to settlement, and it will be the best deal that we've ever done. And we had to shift the way we were talking about it so that we're no longer like, we're not like poking around the bear of, I want to get into buying an apartment complex. Oh, should I do it? Is it really doing bias? And it's like, no, you got to step in the game. You got to figure out the vernacular, and you got to speak that way. And then a friend of mine recommended a book. It's called Force versus Power, I believe. And it's a book on consciousness, and it ties in to, I guess, the transformation of my own spirit and life in regard to consciousness. And one of the main focuses of the book is the little nuances of a lot of different words. And they give a ton of example of these different words and how they apply. And it's like, oh, it's not even what I thought it was. There's even another level to this like elevated way of living life in harmony with the consciousness of the entire like human spirit or the entire living spirit of the universe. And they're talking with Gandhi and kinesiology and science of it. And it can be very boring and unlovable at times, but it is very interesting if you can get through that. The definitions that you're talking about,
Yeah, that's so good. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, right?
That's right.
The Word is important.
So if it's good enough for him, I mean, what about us?
Yeah. Amen, brother.
Power versus Force by David R. Hawkins. If anybody listening wants to check that one out, it's a recent read, and it's impactful for me so far. So, where can listeners get some more information about you, Wyatt? Do you have a website or anything you'd like to point people to?
Yeah, I've got two links for people that are wanting to invest passively and invest in our deals. We have you can go to FC, stands for full circle, so fcequitypartners.com. And then you can schedule a call with me. We can line up more stuff to see if you're a good fit. And then if you're more intrigued about wanting to get coached, so I do coaching. I help people scale portfolios. They can go to www.wyattsimon.com. That's WYATTSIMON.com. And you can schedule a free consultation with me on there. I'd love to unpack what you can do and then supercharge it with the power of financing, so that you can reach financial independence. What I love. I want to create 100 millionaires through real estate. That's my mission this next 10 years.
Nice. Love it. So my final question is, what is the kindest thing anyone has ever done for you, Wyatt?
That's a good one. All right. I'm going to say the kindest thing that anyone has ever done. So my story, I grew up in a private Christian school, and then I totally turned my back on God, and I went and partied in college, and I was just not that great of a kid. I was living for myself. I was doing drugs. I was drinking. I was playing basketball, and just living totally for myself. Okay. And I met my college sweetheart freshman year. It was extremely strenuous on our relationship. We were breaking up. We were back together. We were broken up. And so my beautiful college sweetheart and I ended up breaking up senior year. I moved back to Colorado for a very brief stint, and I came back to God. I found God and gave my life back to Him, and I put my whole self on fertile ground, on solid ground. And then she came out and visited, and it was the best week of our life. And long story short, she has forgiven me for being a young and dumb and sinful man. And we were able to, build an amazing marriage together. So I'm going to say her, and I love her very much.
Yeah, very cool, man. I'm getting chills because a lot of listeners who've paid attention to the show a while know that I have a similar background. So in 2011, when I picked the Bible up, shortly after that, it was on my heart. I was drugs, drinking, and it was a weight on my life that I'm lucky I lived through. And I had 2 years clean in '06 to '08, and the market crashed, and so did I. But the January 21st, 2012, I was able to let go of the drugs, the alcohol, and with the power of God, I always struggled with that, Wyatt. I always would go back. I'd be praying so hard for it not to happen again, and then I'd go back again. And in 2012, it just like fell off like a weight. It was miraculous, and it was like the power of God. And here we are today as a result of, yeah, thank you, thank you. So it's really cool to hear that. I appreciate you
Oh,
sharing
that's
that.
so great. Yeah, thanks for sharing too, Dan. That's amazing, man. There's power in the
Nice.
testimony. Yeah.
Oh yeah, 100%. Well, cool. We are all out of time. Wyatt, great episode. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Had a great time.